It's time for another Out of Bounds Rewind with Bo Bounds on ESPN 105.9, The Zone.
Yeah, and I tell you, this is the thing too, Bo. Is like when you look at the recruiting rankings, I think everybody would say, you know what, Texas A&M clearly has more talent than Mississippi State. I don't know that that's debatable. However, I thought on Saturday, State had more playmakers. Now, that may not show up in the recruiting rankings, but you talk about Emmanuel Forbes kind of exerting his influence on a football game, Camryon Richardson, Caleb Ducking. I mean, Caleb Ducking had one catch at junior college his first year, and now all of a sudden, you know, he's one of the leaders in the country in touchdown receptions.
Hold on.
And so
he only had one. I knew it wasn't many, but he only had one reception in junior college?
His freshman year. Yeah, and then his second year, I think he only had a handful of catches, too. I think he may have had 8 or 9 total catches in junior college. What's a run-first offense, you know? And Caleb was lightly recruited even by the junior colleges out of South Delta High School because, you know, he had a big year. I think he had 16 touchdown receptions as a senior. But for some reason, he didn't get a lot of offers from even the junior college ranks. He goes to Holmes and comes to camp. And Joe Moorhead and the staff see him, and they said, we got to take a chance on this kid. Joe and I messaged about that a few weeks ago, and I was like, Joe, I don't know what you saw in this kid, but he's doing really well, you know, before the season started. And so I think if you watch that game, like if you didn't know anything about recruiting rankings or didn't know anything about, you know, the SEC talking heads, if you just had an objective view at that ball game, I think you would say Mississippi State has out-recruited Texas A&M.
That would throw some people off. Steve Robertson on the Yuengling Lager guest line. Let's discuss Rara Thomas. He made a play that Mississippi State receivers don't usually make. He caught the football, shook off a defender, a DB, and ran it in for a long touchdown of 75 yards. That doesn't happen. When they score in different ways the last 10, 12 years under Mullen and Leach, and I guess a little bit under Moorhead. What's your takeaway on Rara Thomas? He's still super young. You know, how much more is there? Can he be like really, really good, or you think he is what he is? Where is this going with Rara Thomas?
No, I think he can be much better, and I think that's the encouraging thing for State. I mean, it's a maturity thing. He's got to grow up a little bit and become more consistent because you have some games you see these flashes and you think, man, this kid's going to be a star, and then sometimes he disappears a little bit. You know, and if he's going to be the guy that we hope he can be, if he's going to be Mekhi Polk and be better after the catch, then he's got to be more consistent. And I think there is a little more left in the tank. And you make a good point too, Bo. And you know, let's just call it for what it is. There have been years in the past that, you know, Mississippi State receivers just didn't have the skill set to make anybody miss after a big catch. It was all they could do to catch a football. You know, you just want to go make the reception and move the chains and get the big gain. But, you know, I think now with guys like Rara Thomas, you can turn, you know, that 7-10-yard type hitches and turn it into a big play. And I love the play call there too, because even though State was not really in any type of anxiety situation, it's like A&M goes down and they score, and you immediately take a shot right there. You flood the right side, you get Rara in single coverage, you lay it up, let your guy go make a play for you. And at that point, the ball game was over. I think everybody knew it. I mean, State was already in good shape, but I think at that point, I think A&M at that point realized this game was over. It just kind of depends on what the final score is going to be.
Okay, what did you make of 24 carries and 144 yards on the ground? And do you think that they'll stick with 24 carries? You know, do you think they'll stick with this and that MSU will continue to see this?
Well, I think it's a byproduct of two things. I think, number one, State's running game has grown up a little bit. It's never going to be, you know, the key tenet of the offense. But I think, you take what they give you and put them in conflict, right? You go out there and you run the football and you make those linebackers respect the running game. And A&M is abysmal against the run. I mean, they're barely inside the top 100. I mean, they're not a good running team. I think some of that is, you know, DJ Durkin's a guy knows what he's doing, but you've got some talented personnel playing basically a different scheme. You know, they went from a 4-down front to a 3-down front. I think they're having some difficulty adjusting against the run, and they're going to see a running game this weekend that'll make your toes curl, to say the least, against Alabama. But I think it's State doing a good job and A&M being kind of unsure of their jobs. And those two situations kind of met together. It ended up being a good result for State as they outrushed the Aggies that are a run-first team.
So it's exciting. Leach needed a big win at home in the staff. They needed a big celebration on the campus. It had been a long time. We talked about this, right? NC State and Kentucky were nice wins, but they needed a really, really big win on campus. So, having said that, what are you concerned? I think people probably want me to go all positive 20 minutes with you. What are you still concerned with coming out of that game going into when they play Arkansas?
Well, you knew that A&M defensively was going to be pretty stout, and I think State actually embarrassed them late. But you knew in the first half that A&M was going to be ready to go, and you and I talked about last week. We thought it'd be a nip and tuck game that may go down to the final possession, and it didn't. But I'd like to see State come out and maybe look like they know something that everybody else doesn't against an SEC West opponent. Come out, get the quick start, scheme some things up, and get a little separation early. And even though it worked out pretty well, and State has had some good starts this year, but it hadn't really been against SEC competition. And so that's where I think I'd like to see some things there. And then the health of the offensive line. That's one of the things, too. You're starting two different guys now, two different spots. And Nick Jones kicks out to left tackle. Lasoya is inserted in as a left guard. But you don't give up a sack. And that's the thing you think about. They ran for a season high and they didn't give up a sack. And so it's almost like addition by subtraction in some respects. And that was the concern kind of coming into this. But, how long can you do that? There's some guys out there that, got some developmental things they got to work on and get better at. But I think, sometimes we're kind of hypercritical of coaches, but when you look at the fact that Mason Miller had to kind of move some pieces around, he holds A&M, 0 sacks. And A&M's not a tremendous pass rushing team, but from an athletic standpoint, you'd expect at some point them to win some matchups, and they haven't. And I'd like to see a little bit better safety play at times too. I think tackling sometimes it's kind of they go in stages. You know what I'm saying? It's like they'll be really good for a while when everybody's juiced up, and all of a sudden State gets a little bit of a lead, and it seems like our tackling effort at times gets a little bit lax. And so that's something that's probably got to change. But I think you make a good point too, Bo. It's like you can't, the fans can afford to get irrationally exuberant, right?
Don't miss one moment of the Out of Bounds Show with Bo Bounds. Weekdays 7 a.m. till 10 a.m. on ESPN 105.9 The Zone.